Hi, I'm Don.
And hi, I'm Cindy, and welcome to Pearls of Liberty for April 10th, 2011. We're glad that you joined us today. We are going to be discussing a few things, and we also have a segment that is with our friend Dr. Noah that we think you'll enjoy. One of the significant news items recently is stating that 33% of people who enter hospitals encounter some kind of an issue, a problem with surgery, medications, mix-ups, whatever. And Dr. Noah has some comments on
That
it.
actually got out through something like Newsbacks or something so it's a major news item, and of course our friend Dr. Noah is very aware of that. So we have a long segment coming up discussing that, and also personal philosophy of liberty, especially as it relates to health, with Dr. Noah. So that's coming up. We're going to try to keep the other portions brief, although there was some significant news this week that we want to make sure to discuss.
Yes, there was some very significant news this week. And of course the government shutdown, which we'll talk about just a little. And one item of news that impacts the truth movement to some extent, because many people who think they're in the truth movement are his fans, and that is the fact that Glenn Beck is going to be leaving Fox News. So,
Right, and that is not really a good thing. So we don't want to say hoo-ha, yah, rah, we kicked Glenn Beck out. I want to put it in perspective, though, that what has happened with the Glenn Beck phenomenon is that Fox was trying to co-opt the truth movement, and Glenn Beck was being forced more and more to cover real issues, but still staying within the false left-right paradigm. Still, Beck is easily identified with being somebody on the right, and that is still very controllable. That's the game that the mainstream media plays. So it's a good thing that Beck was being forced to cover more and more real issues, as brought out by Alex Jones and others who are having an increase of following among the alternative media. So it's not a good thing that Beck is being let go, but here's how I see it in perspective. You may not even remember, or maybe off the radar now, that Keith Olbermann was forced out of MSNBC. So what I see happening here is that the dominant mainstream media is trying to narrow the field, herd everybody down the middle. When you get out of the mainstream, either to the fake left, as Keith Olbermann was doing, or the fake right, as Glenn Beck was doing, people tend to start thinking for themselves. And from the system's perspective, that's not a good thing. So I see it as being a trade-off there between Olbermann being let go and Glenn Beck being phased out. So that's in a way not a good thing overall, of course, because the perspectives are being limited and we're getting to less and less of an exchange of free ideas. Of course, we want to point out that it was George Soros and Media Matters and their advertising boycotts and pressure that put pressure on Fox News to let Beck go. They also point to declining ratings, but that's only in the near term. In the long term, he was growing. So what we see is, I think, a failure of the mainstream media to co-opt the liberty and truth movement people. Once you're awake, you begin to see through that stuff. My hope is that the people that were growing in their appetite from the types of things that Glenn Beck was talking about will find Alex Jones and other people that talk from outside of the mainstream media left and right perspective, more along the lines of libertarian Ron Paul perspective. So that's actually another item that we want to make sure to discuss, is that Ron Paul did announce this week that he will be participating in an upcoming debate, which is a virtual guarantee that he will be running for the presidency.
well, that's great. And Jesse Ventura was making some overtures this week that he would like to be a running mate with Ron Paul.
Right.
So we'll see if that goes anywhere. That would be an interesting combination.
Very much, because Jesse comes more from the typical Democratic perspective, and he said that he sees that Ron Paul is really the only person that is truthful enough and has enough integrity to run with on the presidential ticket. And actually, he was asked if he would run with Ralph Nader. He said no, only with Ron Paul. So that's very interesting to me, because that would put the break it completely out of the left and right. With you have Jesse coming from more of a Democratic type background, more friendly to the kinds of things that the Democrats tend to be interested in, but still from a completely freedom and truth movement perspective. There's also the possibility that Rand Paul might run with his father Ron. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and we don't want to encourage people to look to presidents as saviors. We want to encourage everyone to take responsibility for their own selves and their own lives, but we do see that there is a movement and it is growing in strength, and that's a very good thing.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So we will say a little bit about I'm calling it the fake government shutdown. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that every time they discuss a new budget, we have to go through these gyrations about, oh, the government's going to shut down. I don't know if they want us to be reminded how much we depend upon them or exactly why they do that. But one of the issues that was on the table, supposedly, was Planned Parenthood funding. And for conservative people who have participated in Right to Life, which I myself have, and people to whom that issue is paramount, I would like to suggest that perhaps that issue is not paramount. I was a single issue voter based on the Right to Life ideas for many, many years. But I believe that those of us who were single issue voters were often manipulated and easily manipulated by the political system, because they could promise us that they would reverse Roe v. Wade and we would follow them anywhere. And they haven't. Roe v. Wade was, I think, 1972 or 73. It's now, in case you hadn't noticed, 2011. So when these issues are put before us, I, in many respects, believe they are a distraction from the true issues. And from when we're busy writing letters for Right to Life, we feel as if we're accomplishing something, but are we? So that's kind of my perspective on the government shutdown brouhaha.
Right. I think that I agree completely. What we don't want to lose sight of is the fact that the elites, the controllers, those that really do manage our political system, are always thinking that the best way to control the opposition to their globalist, eugenicist agenda is to lead the opposition. So if we have somebody that says that they will fight for right to life, we think, oh good, they're on our side, we get behind them. But what's really happening is they're manipulating us. They're just using us because they get other items on their agenda done and nothing on the true, the thing that we want. So local control is the answer. I don't think it's useful to consider that Roe v. Wade will be overturned at the national level. It's best addressed at the state level and through doing a grassroots support for the unborn. That's the way to go.
Absolutely. And ironically, one of the other issues on the table this week, one of the threatened shutdowns, was that they were planning to stop paying military men and women. And I find that ironic because the only thing that our federal government is really chartered to do by the Constitution is provide for the national defense. Mm-hmm. And that was the first thing they were willing to shut down as far as finances when the budget wasn't
Yeah,
appropriated.
it's total manipulation, total fraudulent grandstanding. I even did see one congressman not really particularly addressing the military budgetary issue, but just in general. And I can't remember the man's name, I think he was a junior congressman without a whole lot of seniority, but he did get up on the floor and he did say, it looks to me like this whole thing is a grandstanding operation from Obama and the administration that has been long in planning. Having looked at how this thing came about being set up, it's not some spur of the moment, oh, gee, this week we just realized there isn't enough money, so we're going to have to shut the government down. No, it's been a strategy that's been played out over a long period of time, and the gullible public, us poor suckers, eat it up, unfortunately. So when we see issues like the military not getting their pay, that's meant to pull your heartstrings. Of course it's outrageous. Of course you should stand against it. But let's not be suckers.
Sure. In some respects, it's another issue along the lines of Planned Parenthood. There are certain things that they are aware that everybody's emotional about, and if they can get us all on board regarding the things that we're emotional about, if we can be all stirred up, then it's easier for them to manipulate us because we're focused in such a tight area.
Right. The more that we're the more emotionally driven we are, the more controllable we are. The more we get into our reactive lower brain center, the more we are easily led. And the controllers know this. We need to be able to look past the surface and find out what the real issues are and not be so easily led along. And that takes research. That is not something you're going to get from the mainstream media. The mainstream media is owned by the global bankers who are invested, absolutely invested in manipulating people. So we have to do our research, be responsible, get behind the issues, dig into what is really behind things.
So please do that. Another issue this week, Alex Jones had Lyndon LaRouche on InfoWars as a guest, and Lyndon LaRouche had some very interesting things to say, and we will put up the link where you can find that video, or the audio, pardon me, the podcast from last Thursday. David Icke was also on the show. Very well worth listening to, all 3 hours of that show. But a couple of things that we will mention about it is one of the highlights that Lyndon LaRouche talked about the FDR point of view. And I know you have some things you'd like to say about that.
Right. The interesting thing about where Lyndon LaRouche is coming from is he does correctly, absolutely correctly, in my opinion, recognize that the root of the problem is the British banking system takeover of the American economy. And that, in his view, occurred after FDR via the Truman, who came after World War II. Now, from our research, we see that the roots were actually much deeper and much earlier than that. And what Lyndon LaRouche doesn't recognize is that big government is inherently a problem. It's inherently an issue. And I cannot recommend more highly a video, short YouTube video to watch to clearly point this out from a philosophical point of view than Stephan Molyneux's The Story of Your Enslavement. It absolutely, I wouldn't say proves, but maybe comes close to proving on philosophical grounds how the larger government gets, the more enslaved people become. And of course, FDR was a big government person, and that's the tendency of those that identify with the left today, is to think that government is the people and government can be the means to set us free. I believe that that's a snare. I believe that that's a trap. I believe I'm on the side of Thomas Jefferson and other founders who recognized that government is the problem, not the solution, something Ronald Reagan said. Good words, but I'm not sure that the actions lined up. We want to always recognize that there are people that are out for control and domination and very deceitful. They have been a part of government throughout history. As the bigger government grows, the more it attracts the pathocrats, the people that are the psychological deviants that want to manipulate other people. They get power from getting other people to do their will. And we have previously spoken about the book that makes this so clear. The name escapes me at the moment, but the pathological people that the political ponerology is just an excellent book to really solidify in your mind that you never want to let government get too big, because it attracts the type of people that will bring enslavement. And this is what the American experience, the American Revolution is supposed to be all about. Is it's supposed to be about individual responsibility. And the larger government gets, the less individual responsibility there is, and the more inclination there is to think of government as your daddy, your caretaker, somebody that's going to make it all better for you, and the less personal responsibility you have. That's not freedom, ladies and gentlemen. We just have to get away from that.
Who's your daddy? It's God. God is your daddy, ultimately. I hope you're not offended by our saying that. God is your daddy.
I want to be quick to jump in, and there is a common misconception when people that aren't used to having a personal relationship with God to identify God as that big person in the sky that hangs out at the local building down the street that has a cross on it or something similar. That's not what we're talking about. Throughout history, religion has been as much, maybe at times more, of a tool for enslavement than government. So what we're not talking about is a daddy in the form of a person or a religious structure, but a connection with a divine being that we refer to as our Father in heaven, who is able to communicate directly with each of us, telling us for our own personal lives what to do, what not to do, in the sense of enhancing our conscience and our sense of right and wrong. I believe we need a personal revival in our world so that we can know where to stand and not put up with the garbage that's being thrown at us that has weakened us. That's been a part of the strategy of the controllers to wear us down and make us weak, is to turn off that moral compass inside of each of us. And we need to take a stand and say, no, we know what's right and what's wrong, and that's the way that we're going to live our lives. Now, there's a step beyond that I think that it's dangerous to take, and that is we're going to impose that right or wrong on other people. We don't see God doing that with his people, and we should not do that with each other. What we want to do is to give our fellow man the most liberty possible, but yet there needs to be a punishment when we get into harming other people. So liberty needs to be the primary value, and imposing moral values is not something that we as Christians, Cindy and I, want to endorse.
No, seek the Lord for yourself. Another idea that Alex Jones was discussing on Thursday with both David Icke and Lyndon LaRouche to some extent was the idea of information overload, media overload. And we ourselves this week have come across a few. We mentioned the Beatles, the film about Paul is Really Dead last week. There's quite a lot of disinformation in that film, and we've encouraged you before to anticipate that you will encounter layers as you seek truth. The first thing you find under the obvious is very likely not going to be the truth. But even taking that a little further, what Alex Jones was discussing this week was how that kind of need to seek for truth, which if we're not aware of it, if we're not awake and anticipating that, it can be very confusing when we go and begin to look for truth. We will just find mountains of information, and it can be confusing, difficult to process that information. And the elite are aware of this. That's one reason that there's so very much information out there, because what the effect that it has on people is that it causes us to shut down and become mentally immobilized and emotionally immobilized, unable to process things properly.
Right. We can get so many conflicting ideas and feel so inadequate to process it all that we can just shut down and become zombies. And that is actually what they want. So what we encourage you to do is do as much as possible on your own, but there are huge resources and truth-oriented communities out there on Facebook, on Twitter, lots of people, lots of ideas. In order to be free, if you want freedom, you really have to begin to process the stuff yourself. Don't depend on any one person. There are leaders that we respect and we mention, obviously, but they don't agree 100%. The point is that you need to begin to recognize sources of truth and process from those sources as much as possible. Find other sources, weigh them, and go through a process yourself where you begin to take responsibility for what you believe to be true about the world that we live in. It's so important to begin that process and stop putting yourself in the position of being just a blank slate, just a receiver. It's not possible to be free living that way.
Excellent. We wanted to mention another thing that Lyndon LaRouche touched on, but Don has some more in-depth information regarding articles of impeachment being put together for Obama.
Right. Actually, Lyndon LaRouche didn't, I don't believe, specifically mention impeachment, although I'm sure he has at various times in the past. But he kept saying, we've got to get rid of this guy, Obama. And then one of the things that Alex Jones mentioned was, well, we've just got other people waiting in the wings that are just as much of a puppet as he is. But the next day or so, one of the people that was on Alex's show was an attorney, Harvard-educated, named Bruce Fine, and he has written up and is circulating in Congress articles of impeachment against Obama. And we mentioned previously that how outrageous it was that our military has committed forces in Libya without even consulting Congress, except a few people behind closed doors in an unofficial capacity. That is hardly constitutional. So what Mr. Fine is doing is saying, this is the line in the sand. This is where we need to say no more. This is blatantly unconstitutional, even beyond the chairing for the month of the UN Security Committee that no president, no U.S. sitting president has ever done. So this is something that we personally get behind and encourage other people to get behind, not because we think Obama's a bad man or because he had any kind of personal issues along the lines of Bill Clinton or whatever. This is something that needs to be done on purely a constitutional basis to say, no, this is not something that we can let slide. And it's worth fighting for. This is the place, I think, where we need to begin to build our resistance. I don't know how many congressmen are going to stand behind this. I know for sure that Rand Paul, and a few others will. But this is where we need to go to stop our government from getting completely away from the people. This is the way an empire acts. This is not the way a republic that is responsible to the people acts. And we have to say no.
No! We're not going to turn into Howard Beale. I did think, though, that it would be kind of funny. I mean, I was just imagining in my head if, as Glenn Beck leaves Fox News, he were to turn into a kind of a Howard Beale, mad prophet of the airways, because, Howard Beale didn't really get on that track until he was going to be fired for bad ratings. We can only hope, right? So, again, we would like to thank our friend Dr. Noah and introduce this segment of the show in which he participated.
And thanks for coming back. It's Saturday. I'm here with Don and Cindy. They invited me back. This is a great opportunity to share with you out there some really cutting edge type of information to be able to empower yourself with your health and well-being. And so when you do that, who has the best concerns for yourself? Yourself. I mean, you don't want to be relying on someone else, someone with a white coat, especially. As we'll talk about some of the studies, the most dangerous place to be is in a hospital, in a drug doctor's office, and so you really want to basically go outside that box.
And doctors are hit by every kind of different condition. If you just study a little bit, so much information is available on the web. Mm-hmm. You can easily know more about your condition from a health perspective than a doctor.
And as we were talking earlier, when we were all growing up, how often did you go see the doctor or go to the hospital? Zero. Mm-hmm. You'd literally have to have a broken bone to be serious. That's where things should be now. But unfortunately, Johnny or Mary has a little ache in their ear, ER room. They go to the doctor. You have a little boo-boo somewhere. There's natural things out there that basically help people be able to get well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So
a kind of an interesting study. One of the fastest growing new cancers out there is esophageal cancer. Real big concern. Very deadly. The survival rate is less than 2 to 5% at best, and survival means within a year you're dead. Here, strawberries help with esophageal cancer. So people have this kind of misnomer, I'm going to go see a real doctor. I'm going to really take real drugs. Food and natural things are so powerful, people just can't wrap their head around, because the drug companies have fooled people thinking is, unless some guy in a chemistry lab puts this together, all this stuff is a joke. Well,
it's a new high priest class.
It is.
That we have to give our will over to.
Mm-hmm. What percentage did you say? What percentage of prescription drugs are derived from
40% of all
plants?
drugs on the market have their origin from herbs. And as I've both told Cindy and Don here, is the drug companies have a vast army of botanists and other types of people going out into the Amazon, into the rainforest to find unique type of compounds, because they've kind of exhausted everything. Nature has created incredible type of compounds. So they've gone to shamans in the Amazon, and they've asked them, what do you do for this kind of condition? Skin cancer. Oh, well, we take this bark over here and we rub that and it goes away. Just like there's a compound, there's a special tuber or a potato from Australia. For basal cell and squamous cell, you put this on, 100% success rate of its skin cancer going on.
We have to wait until the chemical companies can package it and make the money from it, and then we can get it through our healthcare.
So where do they find that out? Oh, they asked the Aborigines who've been using it for 40,000 years. What do? They go get this, they dig this little tuber out, this little potato, rub it on their skin, because they didn't have the luxury of using, SPF, 7,000 and having stuff like that. They're out in the Australian outback, like that. Why don't they all be dying of skin cancer?
Isn't it true that putting that stuff on can actually increase the risk of skin cancer?
Yes, sunblocks can, exactly right. And because you have a false security of thinking that you have this magic cape on, if you really read the directions, a lot of the chemicals that can actually cause that, or what happens is you apply it on and you think you're good for the rest of the day. It only works for about an hour and a half, and so now you've gone out there, overexposed yourself, and because of the oxidative stress, cause a different type of disorder. And we've talked about a great product out there. So strawberries, and where'd that come from? That only came from, where was that? Wake Forest? Yeah, Ohio State Comprehensive Cancer Center in Columbus.
And when we're talking about natural cures and using food to treat the body,
right,
don't we have to be concerned about getting foods that don't have chemicals in them themselves?
Well, that's the best. This study here, I'm sure they didn't use organic. These are drug doctors. They're, once again, as you guys are talking about, vets have probably 10,000 times more nutritional. Myself and my colleagues probably have 10 trillion times more information like that. No, but this is just probably just a strawberry extract that they got. So yeah, I would definitely go even further in terms of using organic and more natural type things. Freeway pollution causes brain damage. So that was a new study that came out, University of Southern California, is that people just say, oh, well, you know, my mother just got cancer and she never smoked and I don't know where that came from. Well, our environment, you don't have to be exposed to that kind of direct stuff.
What about things like putting a negative ion generator in your car to be able to purify the air?
It does, because what that does, and that's what this article goes about, is that it's not so much the chemicals, it's the particulars. There are 1/1000th of the thickness of a hair. These little particles are toxic going, and what an ion generator does is put a charge to that and makes it fall to the ground so that you don't breathe it. So those are great. I have one in my car.
Yeah, I've been wanting to get one.
And they're pretty expensive. You can get them for like $10 or $20, and they're really kind of good.
It's more like
That's
50 or something.
Well, maybe they are.
Depending on what you get.
Mine's about 15, 20 years old,
Yeah,
so
we gotta
probably
check your
go up.
source. Yeah.
Things gotta go up like that. So that's where you really have to take charge. And then before we started on here, I was seeing some patients. We talked about Marin County has one of the highest breast cancer rates, and we actually have a little chart there showing that. And what's the current thinking is it's lifestyle changes. You know, lifestyles that causes that. So that's
Things like plastic surgery and Botox
and just being around lots of chemicals. Even though they have lots of money, they use a lot of caustic things. I was at this party in San Francisco with other doctors, and the host there was just using like Lysol. Lysol is very toxic. I mean, that's just garbage. I mean, it's more toxic than what you're trying to do here. Here's a study that showed that meditation is at least 100% more effective than actually morphine. So this is from Wake Forest Medical School. Yeah.
for pain treatment.
For pain treatment. So calming your mind, you know, there's different types of biofeedback, meditation, prayer. These are all things that are able to induce a state where we're able to produce our own pain-killing type of compounds called endorphins and ketones, which are 1,000 times or 1,000% stronger than morphine.
I know you use Holosync. I just had that treatment.
That's
Does
exactly
that
right.
tie in
That
with
does.
the
That has been shown to have correlate in terms of releasing these chemicals that reduces stress, but also once again release these chemicals and make you feel better. And these are 1,000% stronger, and that's what this particular type of study using advanced technology called functional MRIs. We're actually able to see the brain working. But what was interesting here is that we found a big effect, about 40% reduction in pain and 57% in reduction. Meditation produced a greater reduction in pain than even morphine, a narcotic.
That's amazing.
Which typically reduces ratings by only 25%.
That's
Holosync, acupuncture, Skinar have been shown to work way better than that. But once again, you know, people think, you know, well, I'm really in pain, I have to take a drug, and it's just not, the science doesn't support it.
And it's not addictive.
And it's not addictive. Oh, shucks.
Well, it is addictive. But it's a good
In a good way.
addiction.
It's a good one. And that's the problem. The drug companies want you to be addicted because now you're a lifelong user of this, and they got money coming in.
Absolutely.
As we've talked about before about some things being done in terms of helping protect yourself for the Japanese radiation there, is part of the deception are two factors. One is they're focused on iodine, and we've talked about some things like that. That only has a half-life of 8 years. What you really be thinking about, as we've talked about, that's what's the beauty of these other natural products like seaweeds and miso, is the other type of radioactive isotopes like cesium-137, uranium-238, plutonium, strontium-90. These also go into your body, and so when you take potassium iodine, it only blocks one part of it. That's when it goes to. And so there's a nice article here about that, the cesium deception. That's why the government and the media just keep focusing on iodine, because they can say, well,
It's something they can sell.
well, they can sell, and two is, you know, is it of the evils, it's lesser of the evils, because it has a quick half-life like that. So the other issue is that which has been going on is that in this article here is that eating radioactive food is far more dangerous than nuclear fallout, because it has to do with the inverse square law. Is as when you get radioactivity inside your cell, the distance between the radioactivity and the cell are once again very, very small. So that increases the toxic factor, whereas the further you're away of this source, the less it is. So by having it inside your body, just kind of common sense, makes it a lot more toxic.
Wow.
So by eating this food, it can actually be worse than being exposed to it outside.
One of the things that I've been doing, as I mentioned to you, that ties in here is that drinking bentonite clay.
Which is great.
A tablespoon a day before I go to bed.
Long-term traditional.
Blend it up.
There's French green type of clay. There's all kinds of traditional ancient wisdom use these different types of soils whatever they found, as a way of cleansing and protecting their body from these different types of toxic things, which thousands of years ago was bad, but now it's like 10 trillion times worse than that. So that's kind of interesting. So the basic theme today is, so what's the most dangerous thing out there? Heart disease, cancer, or medical drugs and procedures?
Stay away from hospitals.
Exactly. Well, not only, but just stay away from drugs and surgery. But
Yeah.
So a landmark study just came out that 33% of the people going into a hospital are hurt or killed.
Oh my gosh.
Hear that again. Out of 100 people, 33 people will be hurt or killed.
Oh.
Now,
in a hospital.
I work in a hospital.
my.
Does that mean that in IT, if I go in there 10 times, I have I might die like 3 times?
Well, actually, you being in there, it's like going to a toxic waste dump. You are exposing yourself to pathogens. We know conclusively that, most of the bugs that we're worried about are caused from hospitals. So when you go into a hospital, you are one, around sick people.
I'm fortunate. I work in a building
Well, that is
that's
fortunate.
separate. So.
And two is that you're exposing yourself to different toxins. We talked about that chemotherapy is now considered a toxin, which it is. They use, once again, people around it, which would be common sense, but I mean that's how dumb medical doctors are. They thought that since they're so special, they could give this crap to people. Well, now they're finding out there's a backlash. They're dying of cancer. The nurses, the pharmacists, and now they have to handle this stuff like toxic waste, which it is.
Wow.
So if your doctor puts on a biohazard suit,
Exactly.
you might have a little reason to be concerned.
Well, and you wonder why, gee doc, if this is so good, why are you so concerned? And show me the science that this works. Oh, that's right, they don't have any.
Well, what is the 33%? What are some, could you just give some examples of some of the causes of death
Well,
in
we've
that?
talked a little bit on my YouTube like that, is the madness is this crazy. 200 or 300 years ago, maybe a couple hundred years, Dr. Lester discovered that, when doctors would work on cadavers and then walked over and worked on women giving babies, they would die of infections. So, God forbid, you wash your hands, and that's how basic. That took about 50 years for the medical profession to get. Dirty hands kills people. Well, here we are, 2010, study came out. How many people are killed in the hospital and from doctors all around per year because they don't even know how to wash their hands? 100,000 people are murdered per year because they don't even understand from when they were 5 years old. Their mommy and daddy told them, wash your hands after you use, go to the bathroom.
But it's also more complex because you get these MRSA bacteria and they have generated highly resistant forms because they use these antibacterial washes.
And antibiotics, exactly. They've created these monsters, they themselves. And so
and there's good reason to suspect that they knew that would happen when they did that.
So to answer, so washing, they don't wash their hands. Bed sores kill hundreds of thousands of people a year. We'll call it like that.
Wow.
Because they don't have, once again, the understanding that they have to rotate. When you lay down for long periods of time, that pressure causes your skin to start to basically be hurt. That causes sores that become infected. They die.
My.
Plus the medication. Oops, we gave Mary too much, she died.
Or the wrong one.
Or the wrong one, exactly. Or doing procedures. When you do surgery, there's what's called risk versus benefit. Some surgeries have the death rate of, out of 100 people, 13 people die from it.
Wow.
Why
do people accept those odds?
Because they're just, once again, sheeple. They walk around mindless, thinking that whatever some drug doctor or you go to the hospital, they know best. And like I said, people need to go on the internet and saying, okay, Dr. Smith, why are you giving me? There's no science. I went to a kind of a neighborhood networking dinner in San Francisco, and there was a psychiatrist there. And I was just happening to talking, and I was trying to be pleasant. And there was a naturopath. Well, I tried to be. I'm not trying to always fight. But, there was a woman naturopath, and he was really getting on it. Where's the double-blind placebo studies about using turmeric? And I said, well, there are, and I'll be happy to email you. But do you know how to read? Okay. Second thing is that, doctor, you give me the randomized controlled double-blind crossover studies about SSRIs that you give out every day. I said, I'll be happy to. Well, I'll save you some time. There aren't any. And when they do, basically they show there's no better than placebo. So don't give me
Or
this.
you get this negative backlash years later when you block all the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and that it causes the violent behavior.
Suicide, depression itself, side effects.
So you're creating the problem that you're claiming to solve.
Absolutely, absolutely. But so he backed off because he knew he didn't have that chip. He just thought because he's an MD,
I can say double-blind study.
Okay, bullshitter.
What's a double-blind study, sir?
Okay, double-blind. Well, a double-blind crossover study is where the doctor doesn't know which one is real. The patient does, because there is, both in natural medicine and in medicine, is that the mind has a very strong influence on what happens. So if the doctor says, okay, Cindy, this is a real, the drug rep just came in, he paid for my vacation in Hawaii, and $1,000, and they told me.
How nice for you.
I know, it was great. So I'm really jazzed about this because, I'm able to get a kickback. Get educational information back like that. Because in New Jersey it's called a bribe, but for, in drug
Because
industry,
you want to help me,
yeah,
right?
I want to help you. And so obviously you've gone to this doctor, you want to get better, and so there's that's called the influence factor, perception like that.
Sure.
So they've known that for quite some time, and that would be fine. I have no problem with placebo effects, but when the drugs cost $200-300 a month, and like Don said, causing billions of dollars of side effects, then why not just give them an herb or something, or give them something natural or something like that? That'll be a lot better. At least save us money and people wouldn't be hurt. So that's a double blind. Then what they do is a crossover. They want to be able to follow the drug and make sure it is working, so that even with that blind there's still maybe some other types of perception thing. So they use codes. So say A is the positive thing that they're trying to do, and B is the placebo. So they do A for about 8 to 12 weeks. And then they cross over and they bring it to the other group that would have placebo. And that's exactly what they should see. They should see the responses change like that. So the placebo, which again should have very little benefit, and then all of a sudden they give the drug, goes up, and then the one, or the drug or the natural thing, and then with the natural thing, when they start off, it should go better. And when they cross it over to with the person who has the placebo, it should go down. So that's what a double-blind placebo crossover study is. Well, they've done, once again, as I told this quack, the psychiatrist, is that when they've done this study, and the last one which was the largest one done, showed that there was no better benefit than placebo. So one, I think it's fraud.
Wow.
It's fraud. You're causing people to pay good money through their insurance and stuff for stuff that's no better than placebo. That's quackery.
There should be full disclosure where they're required to tell you about studies like that.
So after that talk, he never said anything bad to any other, because most of the people there were other chiropractors and naturopaths and stuff like that. And I said, hey, I think his name was Bob, come on my TV show. We'll do this live. So you can't edit it, you can't kind of give them any bullshit, because I'm going to bring in the studies. A Harvard study, medical study, says you're a liar. John Hopkins says you're a liar. So what's going on here? Where'd you go to school? Yeah, you didn't go to John Hopkins or Harvard. So these are your peers saying that basically this is all quackery. So those days are gone.
You have to be able to
when they can bully. Well, they bully people. They think, okay, I'm a medical doctor. Sure, you're smart.
And you went through
you've jumped through some hoops.
The mind control program that made you
going
have
to medical
an inflated
school,
ego to be able to dominate
people.
going
to medical school or any professional, like we talked about, is going to the military. They try to break you and then remold you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that you're a bad person, but they've actually done studies, which is kind of sad about this. Medical students go into medical school because, I want to help people. 4 years later, they don't want to help people. They want to make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So they break people.
And can you talk a little bit about how the trauma, what they actually go through that does break them?
Well, they beat you up. I remember going to school at Rutgers. This is just prerequisites, where the professor for organic chemistry for the 15 minutes told us about how stupid we were. Mm. So they just really beat down on your self-esteem, and when you go into the professions, you have to pretty much you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to make the professor mad because maybe he or she will fail you. Maybe you'll get a bad grade. So there's that constant fear that you just regurgitate the same crap that goes out there. Mm-hmm. And all the great thinkers have said that like Albert Einstein and people with Nobel Prize. The biggest problem is that these quantum jumps occur not by gradual type of learning, is people have to think outside because all you're doing is status quo. It's like washing a hand. That took over almost 100 years for them to accept that washing hands was the cause, because the dogma is that germs weren't really understood.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the same dogma. Chemotherapy is good. Any science? Chemotherapy is good. They don't answer the question. They just, once again, they're parrots.
They don't
they're
think
puppets.
outside the box.
They
And
can't
all
think
the
of-
breakthroughs throughout history have come
Absolutely.
from thinking outside the box.
You
I
bet.
ran into a great example
Yes.
this week that I'll just toss out here, but maybe talk more about online, about a guy that is, his background is computer programming and working in
Yeah.
IT. So, see, he's become, like me, very rigorous in terms of not making any assumptions that you're not able to test, because you very quickly learn working with computers. They're very unforgiving.
Right.
You think something's going to work and it doesn't work, well, you got to find out why.
Right.
And then science is supposed to be like that, because we have this herd mentality,
That's right.
we get away from questioning things. And so he started questioning the makeup of the Earth as it relates to earthquakes, as it relates to
Yeah.
the ability of seismographs to pick up waves on the other side. And he actually found out through scientific modeling and studies and different models of the Earth that this commonly held view of the solid Earth and the differences in the density of the core of the Earth were not as good an explanation of the way that things behave
Right.
as it relates to earthquakes, seismic waves, and a whole bunch of other stuff, as is a hollow Earth. Very, very interesting. Now, this is a guy thinking outside the box.
Right.
And very interesting to listen to him think and process this stuff. Obviously a very intelligent person.
Right.
But this is the kind of thinking that you're talking about.
One of the projects we've talked about before, which we're all excited about, Protandem, and Dr. McCord, who's the discoverer of SOD, this very special thing. In one of the tapes there, which is really kind of good, I mean, a good scientist, that's what he was saying, doesn't try to prove his hypothesis correct. He tries to disprove it.
Exactly.
He tries to keep
That's
tearing
excellent.
tearing it down, and it keeps maintaining itself, tearing it down.
Right.
But unfortunately, what's happening, especially in the drug companies, all they're worried about is, once again, trying to get the end results. I don't care how we get there.
Exactly.
This drug helps this person, cha-ching, because it makes a lot of money. And that was we're very clear with the Vilox.
Yeah.
Here's one drug that killed more people, murdered more people, get that? Murdered more people
If they know what
than the
happened.
Vietnam
That's
War.
exactly
That's what it
right.
is.
So here's a war for 7 years,
Astonishing.
and one drug did that. And what they found out when they started suing these assholes, can I say that? No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're not censored.
That's good. Is that they found out they didn't do science. They did basically the Chinese restaurant approach. They did 7 studies. 6 of them showed it caused heart attacks and death, and one they were able to get a little little benefit there, not real science, and then they went on that one.
Yeah.
And that's how they marketed this program, and that's how it killed all these people.
Yeah.
And that was just one drug.
I went to school in science long enough ago to learn the real scientific method. And
That's
I apply
right.
that every day
Absolutely.
working with computers.
Because it
You have
works.
to.
It works.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great.
And isn't there a equation they use or something to figure out when they put something on the market, they know that they'll have a certain amount of lawsuits,
You're talking about
and they charge enough for the product
That's right.
so that they
Offset
can
that.
cover the lawsuits and still make a profit.
Ford did that way back. I mean, when the Corvair was it? No, it was the Pinto. Pinto, they made a engineering fault
It
where
blew up.
blew up people and killed people. But they
remember
actually figured out, let's see, if we had to come back, it's going to cost us $13 billion to replace it. It's only going to cost us $1 billion for all these people being killed. We'll go with the $1 billion. That's how these
They
people
weigh
think.
the cost of the recall.
It's
versus
same as with the drugs. You know, we know that this is going to kill and hurt and maim people.
certain percentage of people.
And that's just part of doing business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just bullshit.
So the cost of doing business is your life.
Well, and that's a tragedy. So maybe there is something, so horrific out there that they need to take that risk. That's a sadness. There are natural things that have no risk, cost thousands of times less, and works better.
What's the Hippocratic Oath? First, do no harm.
Exactly. But once again, first, make a lot of money. That's what it's all about. It's
That's
change
what
like that. So
That's
it's,
the hypocritical.
no, that's the Forbes oath. In your financial, it's all bottom line. So you're talking about that. So here's a kind of a review about the things. This was 5 years ago. Medical errors kill 420,000 people a year. Now a bigger issue is not a bigger issue. It's just as serious is the cost of this stuff. We've gone bankrupt in lots of different factors but medical sickness is one of the biggest. On my TV show, and as I talk about, the reviews and analysis, not done by chiropractors and naturopaths and herbalists and, Don and Cindy like that. These are people like, Dr. Garson, former president of the medical school at Virginia. Now he's a vice president. He stated that, medicine wastes $1 trillion. That's with a T, $1 trillion. So wrap your head around a trillion. Let's go.
But that doesn't cost me anything because my insurance pays
exactly. For it. And that's exactly right. Well, it does. That's put on a credit card. Our grandkids and great-grandkids are going to have to pay for our greed and selfishness like that and corruption like that. But let's wrap our head around $1 trillion. So 1 million seconds is about 12 years. 1 billion seconds is 32 years. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years.
Oh my goodness.
So when we were growing up, $1 million is a big deal. Now it's like $1 million is like, like finding a penny on the ground. It's like nothing. I mean, everybody wish they had that. The other example I use is that in 6 years of just saving the waste and abuse that medicine does, which would be $6 trillion, everybody in the United States could have a free home.
Oh
so what would you rather have? Bullshit that doesn't work, kills people and hurts people, and costs $1.3 trillion, or in 6 years of that, taking that money, everybody could have a free home.
Free home.
Free home, exactly. So,
it's settled then.
That's right. So bed sores kill 115,000 people a year. I mean, that's just madness. Can you imagine the airlines every year saying, we try to do the best we can, but we kill about 115,000 people. They'd be closed down.
Oh my goodness.
Now! That's right, not tomorrow, now! But the drug companies, once again, are allowed to go along with this bullshit.
Because they're
it's
doctors.
It's all a wide variety of
best.
stuff, so it's not like in one bucket so people can see it. It's dispersed throughout the whole system.
Here's one of my famous, there's been constant studies like that. Every time you go into the hospital, you think, well, gee, people are sick there, there's under a lot of stress. That's where probably the best nutrition in the world is. Because they know that nutrition helps people with faster recovery, less complications. Not so. There's been studies showing that when people go in there, 40% come out malnourished, and that kills how many? 108,800 people a year.
What?
108,000 because eating Jell-O and crap doesn't make you healthy.
Well, and they don't like you to take your supplements.
Oh God, don't do that.
Exactly.
Because they want to kill 108,000 people a year. Unnecessary procedures. I mean, that's a constant thing. Where I've talked about, there's an orthopedic tooth down studies where people, once again, their knee, it hurts and they do an x-ray and it's degenerated. God forbid you try to reverse that naturally. Now that technology is there. They do this surgical procedure, this knee surgery, that has been shown to be no better than...
I saw that, the ACL thing. I saw that on your counter, and I actually had that condition, and they tried to evaluate whether or not
you needed
I needed the surgery, and they ended up saying, well, you can go for a while and see if it's better. And after a while, I went back to, I think it was a different doctor, because I changed jobs and whatever. And they tested, they couldn't figure out which knee had ACL. Because I couldn't remember.
I got it. All that is bullshit. It's all bullshit. But, once again, that generates a $5 billion just that procedure alone. So, I mean, surgeons make lots of money. And they're one of my favorites.
And sports injury, that's a key procedure in sports injuries, surgeries. That's a lot of money there.
Well, we have a mutual friend that has an inguinal hernia. I mean, your choices are going out and spend $15,000. He chose a program that I'm using, which was just substantially less, and it's healing.
That's the laser procedure.
Yeah, right. Laser and using natural nutrients that help with oxidative stress and helps increase your stem cells and helps with healing. Yeah, that happens all the time. Now there is a place, once again, as we talked about. Medicine has a great place in what's called acute care trauma. They're really great with, if I get a bullet through my head, I don't want to put a Protandim on there. I mean, they're really good with that. Like the soldiers I work with in Yountville, a tank rolls over their legs, they need intervention. After that, then that's when they need, basically these things that actually heal the body, not just, once again, numb things by taking pain pills or giving crap that shouldn't be doing there that has little or no benefit or has side effects. So it should be a really integrated system, but once again, it's a monopoly. The medical profession and the drug industry has created a 99.97% monopoly. Like, it's our way or no way. We've talked about other type of systems. I mean, if you don't do something like that, then you're a nut, you're a quack, or we're going to arrest you. no, you're the quack, you're the murderer,
That's
and
right.
let's turn it around. And oh yeah, here's the proof. Here's the science. So it's not
That's
just
amazing.
once again, you like blue, I like red. It doesn't. That's something we can do.
It's not just a preference.
Well, we can agree to be different like that, but we're talking about life and death.
That's
we're talking
right.
about science here. So.
Yeah. Great.
So let me just start to tell you how I really feel about this. so with your website and other people out there, that's the last frontier: talk radio and the internet. And where are they trying to stop this? Talk radio and the internet. They don't want this information out here. And so that's the struggle. And so hopefully people will waken up so that people will start to make changes. We've seen a little bit of that in the last election. People are coming at least, questioning. We have, someone, look at the Federal Reserve. There's nothing federal about it, and there's nothing reserved about it.
That's right.
It's once again, it's a scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's criminal. But so now people are starting to think outside the box and look into these entities that were created back in the 30s not for our best interest, but for wealthy and powerful people that want to keep it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Little off the topic of health.
Take responsibility
Exactly.
for your health.
On
all
Bottom
aspects.
line, don't put your
Well, not
welfare in the hands
well,
of
your
somebody
health,
else.
politics,
Mhm.
liberty, freedom. You have to take responsibility.
grown-up.
It's about
Be-
responsibility.
Be a grown-up,
Yeah.
exactly
Don't be a
right.
child.
Exactly right. Don't wait for someone else. I'll wait until I'm 65 and get Medicare. No, take charge right now. You
That's
don't
what
need
America
Medicare.
is supposed to be about. We're supposed to be about a people that said, we don't want a king. We don't
Exactly.
want somebody to rule over us.
That's right.
We want to make our own decisions.
Right.
We're a republic. We'll have representatives
Right.
that execute
Self-determined.
our choices.
Right.
So we've gotten away from that. We need to get back to that.
And once again, that's what health is. It's a multifactorial thing. It has to do with lifestyle things, but it also has to do with social things, political things, spiritual things. Those are all make up health.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you're trying to eat well, and then you have a dictator that's basically causing stress, you're never going to be healthy.
Yeah.
So
That's
you have
right.
to be able to go against this fascist type of approach, and that's exactly what we're doing. Fascism look it up. It's not some abstract type of thing back in World War II. It's happening right now.
Absolutely.
Where special interest corporations are once again dictating what takes place in our government. That's fascism. And that's happening right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Special interest groups are making, whether that's a drug company, it's some type genetic modified type of food that they create these special type of patented Monsanto, right? Exactly. And a poor little farmer goes over there and they bust them because they're infringing on their patent. And
I got an idea for a website. We should put up this little sign that says, "This machine kills fascists."
I like it.
I think that's an old Pete Seeger's
.com?
thing.
I like it. That's good. That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks again for inviting me on, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. That was fun.
So thank you, Dr. Noah. We appreciate all that information, particularly regarding the danger of hospitals. Please do take that seriously. And now it's time for our Pearl Culture segment. So we've seen not quite as many films this week, at least not ones that are worth mentioning. But we did see Sherlock Holmes, which was excellent. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I can't remember what the exact title is. Is it just called Sherlock Holmes? Because there's several
I think
previous
it's
Sherlock
the
Holmes out there.
young
We're
Sherlock
talking about
Holmes or
the
something.
one with Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
and I forget the other star. But very good, very good. Robert Downey Jr. is a great actor, and we really enjoyed how the film exposed the manipulative techniques that the elite used. In the film, there are these satanic pentagrams, and the whole bit, satanically oriented people in positions of political power, and they are being manipulated by this figure at the top that claims to have magical powers, but doesn't really. He's doing it all via trickery and his knowledge of chemistry and various means that he can use to convince the people, including those that are in positions of political power, directly responsible to him, although that's covert, of course. He's convincing them that he has this power, which he doesn't have. This is absolutely the way that elites throughout history have manipulated the people. They convince people that they have some superior wisdom. And this is, again, what we as Americans need to say is not what we're about. We're all about owning our own destiny, not investing some super being with being a big daddy over us. So it was just great to see Sherlock Holmes, Robert Downey Jr., unravel the mystery and with using logic, not being manipulated by emotions and through his lower brain, and being able to win the day, save the world. So we enjoyed it a lot. There's a great message in it.
Yay, good guys. One thing that that really struck me about the aspect of fear is that the satanic rituals were used to frighten people and to deceive people and to convince them that he had powers that he didn't have. But satanic rituals are also used by the elite to release a greater degree of fear, to kind of, if I may, raise the fear thermometer so that there's more of an atmosphere of fear. Because when there is more of an atmosphere of fear, evil is, and this is a spiritual experience to some extent, evil is more free to reign when there is an atmosphere of fear. When there is an atmosphere of love, justice is more able to reign.
Absolutely, and that's why as Christian believers, we strongly believe that creating an environment of love and worship is the best way to do spiritual forces against the dark spiritual forces that do. Fear does create an environment in which the enemy can gain control, because what it does is it pulls people down into their lower reactive capabilities and less out of their higher. And whereas love lifts people up, fear pulls people down. So putting this principle into context today, we really see how we need to be on guard against fear. That you don't want to limit truth, but you want to recognize when something is when you are becoming reactive rather than knowledgeable and understanding. Let's take a case in point. Fukushima. Lots of information, misinformation, lack of information, fear, hype coming out of that. But we can rise above that and say, look, to the extent to which this may have been caused by man via HARP or whatever, we as people can come against that. We don't want to say, oh, these evil people did this horrible thing and there's nothing that we can do about it. No, we want to find out the extent to which there was manipulation via HARP and explosives and whatever means that are behind it. Now, we may as individuals not be able to get into that place of knowledge, but there are people that are. There are scientists, and we can move out of a place of fear over those events and into a place of saying yes to those who do have understanding and, I believe, empowered by God to understand these things. And we can say, yes, let the truth come out about what evil manipulations there may have been, so that man can rise above and not go into a position of fear. Somewhat philosophical, I know, but we need to recognize when we're not being led by love and we're being reactive and going into a place of fear.
So, if you need a film that will help you move into a place of love, you could watch August Rush, which was mostly a feel-good film. Very magical, not like voodoo magic, but emotional, kismet kind of thing. People who love one another being drawn to the same places. And it was warm and encouraging, and it was a lovely film.
It was very good, and it wasn't completely without its ties to political truth as it relates to who do you trust to be your daddy. I think that the role that Robin Williams played in this film was very interesting. The film, one of my favorite films growing up as a child was Oliver. I don't typically like musicals, but for whatever reason I really liked Oliver. And August Rush is a lot like the movie Oliver. You have a kid who is in the role of an orphan, although he isn't really in this movie, but he comes into a place where it's almost like he's with a group of other orphans, street kids, and they are being helped by this man who is played by Robin Williams, almost like Fagin in the original Oliver Twist. And this man wants to help and recognizes the gift, the genius musical gift that the character August Rush has. In fact, he names him, he gives him his name. But ultimately, he mistrusts others that want to help him to the extent that he tries to control him. So to me, this illustrates that it's not easy, not really clear-cut to recognize who are your friends and who really want to help you and set you free. Sometimes that we do find people in positions of power and authority that don't appear to be rebellious, but really want to stand on the side of truth and freedom. And we can't just cut ourselves off and say, no, they're the establishment. There are a lot of people in the establishment that really are on this side of freedom. And I'm talking about, in the film, the people that were with the Juilliard School of Music that August Rush does get brought into. And the Fagin character, the Robin Williams character, tries to keep him away, tries to shut that down, because he thinks these people are trying to enslave him, but they're not. So I thought that was very interesting. It was very good, and it wasn't completely without its ties to political truth as it relates to who do you trust to be your daddy. I think that the role that Robin Williams played in this film was very interesting. The film, one of my favorite films growing up as a child was Oliver. I don't typically like musicals, but for whatever reason I really liked Oliver. And August Rush is a lot like the movie Oliver. You have a kid who is in the role of an orphan, although he isn't really in this movie, but he comes into a place where it's almost like he's with a group of other orphans, street kids, and they are being helped by this man who is played by Robin Williams, almost like Fagin in the original Oliver Twist. And this man wants to help and recognizes the gift, the genius musical gift that the character August Rush has. In fact, he names him, he gives him his name. But ultimately, he mistrusts others that want to help him to the extent that he tries to control him. So to me, this illustrates that it's not easy, not really clear-cut to recognize who are your friends and who really want to help you and set you free. Sometimes that we do find people in positions of power and authority that don't appear to be rebellious, but really want to stand on the side of truth and freedom. And we can't just cut ourselves off and say, no, they're the establishment. There are a lot of people in the establishment that really are on this side of freedom. And I'm talking about, in the film, the people that were with the Juilliard School of Music that August Rush does get brought into. And the Fagin character, the Robin Williams character, tries to keep him away, tries to shut that down, because he thinks these people are trying to enslave him, but they're not. So I thought that was very interesting.
We will try to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, and recognize the good people, and anticipate good. Again, not live in fear. Another film that we saw recently, in fact just last night, was The Nines. And that is quite an interesting film. If you don't like to see films that push you a little into thinking about things, you probably won't enjoy The Nines. But we enjoyed it very much.
It's, on the surface, not really a trippy movie. If you expect special effects to be the foundation for something that creates an alternate reality. That's not this film. It's not about special effects. What you have is three stories that are tied together in kind of a unique way, and without giving away too much, what I'll say is that it's about levels of control and responsibility that increase with each of the three, and the main character in each of the three. There's people that have, and I was puzzled after the film, I didn't quite get it, and Cindy really helped me to understand this, that the person, it's all about the creative process and being in charge of what's going on in your life, and about intervening so other people can realize that they are more responsible than they think they are. So that's a great lesson, and we want to be able to recognize that we look for others that we want to help wake up. And that's what the phrase throughout the movie, "look for the nines," is about. It's about looking for the people that are the most likely to wake up, to exercise responsibility, exercise vision, and become less servant-like and more sovereign over their lives. And I think if you approach the movie that way, I think you'll see a lot.
Watch it, find out if you're a 9 or not. So that's pretty much our information for the week. Don, do you have any final thoughts or final words?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, live free, love one another.
Yes.
Have a good week. Thanks for watching it.